Hello and welcome to the Rattlebox Games podcast, a bi-weekly romp through the fertile field of the world of tabletop games with your friends at Rattlebox Games. I'm Rob, and I'm here today with
Brendan, and today we're going to be talking about what we've been playing. We're going to talk about games that are mass market but not hobby games. And then we'll be giving you some recommendations that have nothing to do with games.
Splendid! I guess that we should mention that if you have the very righteous urge to get in touch with us,
What if I have Twitter?
then congratulations. I hear the stock's doing well. You can get in touch with us on Twitter. We are
At Rattlebox Games.
You can email us.
Podcast at rattleboxgames.com.
You know what? For that matter, we're Rattlebox Games on all sorts of places. For example,
Instagram.
Sure.
Reddit. Facebook.
Why not?
Whoa.
So yeah, just seek us out and share your thoughts and opinions, especially if they are kind. But speaking of kind, sharing opinions, the greatest gift you could give us is heading over to iTunes or whatever podcatcher you choose, giving us a rating, subscribing to us, and bless your heart if you should give us a review, especially if it's favorable.
Right. Damn your soul if it's unfavorable.
No.
Oh, okay.
But maybe just send that in an email. We'll read that. You don't have to leave that.
Send us. Wait, are we asking people to send us negative reviews?
Well, as opposed to putting them on podcatchers.
Fair enough.
Well, all of that being true and being said, it leads us to the point at which we start to talk about the games that we have played since last we spoke.
And we usually do that by rolling a die to determine just how long we're going to get to talk about those games.
That's somewhat true. I usually use my mouth to do the discussion, but I use the die to determine the length.
Isn't that what I said?
It could be.
Okay.
But I wanted to correct you.
Here we go. Rolling a d6.
Oh, it doesn't count. He rolled it
out of the dice box.
The roll bowl.
The roll bowl. I rolled a 2.
Okay, that's going to keep us pretty tight there. So that will give us 2 minutes.
Okay, let's get the timer queued up here.
Radio.
We're going to have just 2 minutes.
Do you want to go first or second?
I would like to go first. If that's
Please
okay.
do. All right,
here we go. So the game I'd like to talk about today is a game called Beyond Baker Street. We've always played a 2-player. I guess you can play more. But it's a Sherlock Holmes themed game in which the 2 players are trying to solve a mystery. And the mystery, you solve it by eliminating clues and trying to figure out who did something, what they did it with, and where. And the way that you do that is you hold a set of cards. You're playing cards down in order. And the tricky part is that your cards are facing away from you. If you're familiar with the game Hanabi, it's similar to Hanabi, but a more complex gameplay mode.
So basically headbands?
Sure, it is basically headbands, but Sherlock Holmes themed. And more fun. And there's a goofy shenanigan where you're getting rid of cards that are the impossible and all that's left.
All right, you have 3 seconds to say why you like it.
It's really fun, and it's from Z-Man Games.
Okay, the game I want to talk about is called The Last Friday. It's by Ares Games. It came out just last year, and it's basically 80s horror movie, the board game.
Oh, nice.
So you're the campers, and one person is the slasher.
Ooh.
And the slasher, it goes in alternating rounds.
Okay.
Where the slasher's trying to get the people, then the people are trying to find the slasher, and it rotates until eventually there's just one person the slasher's trying to get, and if they get him, it works. Lots of components, pretty nicely built game. I only played it once. It felt a little arbitrary, but it's so hard with a game like that to tell if that's me or it.
Sure.
Doo-doo. And that's their time. Okay. Now we rate on our... every time we talk about a game that we've played, it is incumbent upon us to then
rate it,
quantify that with a rating. And we rate on a D20 scale. So you can have a 1 to 20, but it's specifically from a D20.
Right.
You went first, so
Sure.
do you want to rate?
Well, Beyond Baker Street is a fun game. it does have the sort of strange limitations that Hanabi has, where you try to figure out how much you're actually allowed to talk about because you're not supposed to tell the other person about their cards, but you kind of figure out how to tell them anyway by the clues you're giving.
Okay.
It's strange. It's a fun game. I don't know that it's all that much better than Hanabi. I'm going to give it a 12.
Okay. Boy, it's tough because, I'm talking about a game on its first play. Boy, the guy who taught that game to me was excited to play it. So I wonder if there's not more there. Mm-hmm. But
I think there's a bunch of different scenarios in the game, if I recall. Like, it's not always the same slasher, is it?
I think it pretty much is.
Oh, okay.
From what I could tell, I think it is. You know what? It didn't overstay its welcome. It ended up resolving quickly enough. Now, part of that's because I ended up as the target and got killed in the near the beginning of the fourth phase. But
okay.
So I think I'll give it a sort of 14.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, Beyond Baker Street has a rating of 7.1 on Board Game Geek, and The Last Friday has a 6.7.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm pretty close to agreeing with them. You're a little
sure.
I'm
coming in low. Yeah. So it'd be interesting if I were to play Last Friday. Would I rate it even lower than the 12, or am I just being stingy today with Beyond Baker Street, and maybe a different day I would rate it better?
I have to say, when I had the premise of the game explained to me, I was a little anxious because I knew that the theme is similar to the theme of your game.
Yes, Something Wakes in the Forest.
But that's where it ends.
Yeah, when I first heard about that game, I had the same. There's also another game that was kickstarted last year called Slaughterville, I think, that is also themed around the slasher movie idea, but from the stuff I've read, it is also significantly different in gameplay.
I think that those games have been discussed.
Indeed.
And that would naturally lead us to discussing the topic that we agreed upon.
Topic of the day.
Yeah. Which, do you remember how we came to this?
No.
I think you made a sort of offhanded insult to the game Boggle. And,
you know what? I probably did.
And I mentioned that I might be willing to stand up for Boggle, and that made us think that maybe that was a topic worth pursuing at this point.
Yeah.
So the topic is mass market games, non-hobby games. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a little bleed over. So basically, we narrowed it down to games from sort of before the hobby game revolution.
Right. And
so here's what I ended up in my conception of this. I think it comes down to Milton Bradley and the Parker Brothers. I think that's sort of what we're talking about. Do you want to have that conversation?
No.
Because by the time you're thinking of Hasbro in that space, they've already bought at least one of those companies.
Okay.
Because Hasbro bought Parker Brothers in 98. They bought Milton Bradley in 84.
So when we're talking about this, we're talking about games that you definitely wouldn't say are hobby games now.
For sure.
And probably would have been, even if they were widely available, would have been niche games when they came out.
Yeah, so it's also, hearkening back to our Shelf of Shame discussion, there's some people who define their Shelf of Shame as being these mass market games that are in their collection.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect somehow most of us have a copy of Monopoly floating around,
right?
Like it or not. Like, it's just there. I know I have two.
Mm-hmm.
One in English, one in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish.
It just happened. Okay.
I guess maybe start at the top of the non-hobby game pile. And that's got to be Monopoly.
Yeah. Well, when you tell people you play board games, as often as not, the first thing they say back, if they don't say something like Settlers of Catan, they'll say, "You mean like Monopoly?" That is often the response.
My comment to those people is usually, no, the games I play are on the other side of Risk.
Oh, okay. If you're setting up a geography, Monopoly is in Atlantic City, Risk is all of Europe or the whole world. Yeah, your games are on the other side. Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it.
Like, people know Risk is a very complicated game.
They think of it as really complicated, you mean?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
It's certainly, they know it's time consuming.
Sure.
They know it's got a number of rules, and they know that.
I mean, on the face of it, I don't know that it's that much more complicated than Monopoly.
True. So Monopoly, so old. It's more than 100 years old. It came out in 1903.
Wow.
What would your number rating of Monopoly be on a D20?
On a D20. Okay, are we playing Monopoly the way I played it when I was a kid? Or
By
the way
rules.
By the rules.
By the rules.
It's hard for me to say because I don't know that I've ever played it by the rules. Like, I've read it quite a bit in the last few years about the proper rules for playing Monopoly, and I've never gone and be like, well, maybe it's better than I remember. Let's go try it. I have not done that, so.
Certainly, every rule that you change adds time to the game, right? And I think that is not a service to this game.
So for people who only played Monopoly with grandma or their brothers and sisters and don't know the nuances of the recent public discussions about how you should be playing Monopoly, the key is that, as Rob said, most people, when they play Monopoly in family traditions, have, as a group, added or changed a bunch of rules that make the game longer and less fun.
This is putting the fines in the middle, and you get them in free parking. This is, I think, probably the cardinal sin for playing Monopoly is it seems like no one does the auctions.
And the auction is where if you decide not to buy a property, then it goes up for anyone can buy it for like $1 or $2 or whatever.
Well, that's actually an interesting rule, too. The way it works is the banker holds the auction. So the banker has this one active role besides just sort of the clerical passing out money as appropriate.
And stealing money when they can, if I recall.
Yes. That's actually another way to add time to the game and not make it better. It's not described at all how the banker does that in the rules.
It just says the banker holds an auction.
So the banker can hold an auction starting at any price. They could start an auction, at $1,000 and work their way down. They could start at $1 and work their way up.
Interesting.
And the person who refused the property has the option to purchase it
In the auction along with everybody else. Yeah.
So depending on what your position monetarily is, you could conceivably turn down a property. And if everyone else is super broke,
You could buy it for less than you
could
could
buy
have
it
bought it.
then, less than the listing price.
Seems like that gives the banker an awful lot of power.
It gives the banker an interest, like it makes it a thing.
Which is interesting because I think for most people, being the banker in a game is strictly clerical. It isn't a role that gives you any power.
Well, what you didn't do is give us a number.
I'm going to say 8. There's a lot of luck in it, but I think with the proper rules, the real heart of Monopoly is the negotiation over, I want this, you want that, let's make an argument. Hey, you don't quite have enough money to pay me, so or you're going to have to mortgage all your stuff to pay me, but if you give me that one property instead, I'll waive the rest of the fee. I think that's where the fun of Monopoly comes from.
Although that would be another rule break.
Really?
Yeah. You can sell properties, but first you have to get rid of all the buildings that were on them. And then you can sell them, but you can't trade.
Right. No. Okay. Right. No, I would never trade a property with buildings on it. But if you own all the greens and have hotels on them, and you land on mine, and I want your purple, I could take your purple instead of making you sell all your greens. I could sell you the purple for the price of your rent.
That could be true.
Mostly, I do that with my children to not boot them out of the game.
Oh, I thought you meant you sell them.
Oh, right. Rent. You get a way better return on your investment if you rent your children.
So we're talking about how old this game is. Teddy Roosevelt was president. So here are some of the problems with this game. It's long. We discussed that the fact that people don't play it by the rules makes it longer. That's not the game's fault, per se. A weird thing about Monopoly is, for these mass market games, most of them are not player elimination games. But this is a player elimination game.
That's true.
You get bankrupt, you're out of the game.
And maybe out and sitting around while your friends keep playing for quite a while.
And then there's sort of the icky, greedy, corporate, message to it, right? That, the winner is the one who owns all of the property.
Yeah. Okay.
So Monopoly was conceived of as a counterexample. So
it's
meant to show that
criticism.
Yes. Which is, I think, lost to the mists of time. The fact that this is a game that is meant to show you that monopolies are bad.
Right.
And
look how bad everyone feels.
You're not paying attention to the fact that you're driving your competitors into bankruptcy and abject poverty.
Right.
And that is the point of the game. So that's sort of interesting.
Yeah.
You know, if I had to rate the thing,
And you do.
I guess.
Kind of painted yourself into a corner there.
I know. I think I'd have to put it 6. Like, before, you know, the thing is I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and, like, I was playing this in college, and, you know, any game could be fun if you're playing with a group of people who want to have fun playing the game. So I've had fun games of Monopoly. Monopoly was almost incidental to that.
Sure.
Some of it's a little nostalgia value. It would certainly be interesting. I think maybe we need to play a game of Monopoly by every rule.
You know, I think the other thing that makes Monopoly more fun, and this is true probably of some of the other mass market games, is if everybody is on board with the idea that we are playing this as fast as we possibly can.
Sure.
So it would be interesting too if we're playing, like, we know as soon as it's your turn, you're rolling those dice and you're moving.
But in the end, like, if you're categorizing Monopoly, it's a roll and move, and there aren't many decisions, right? I mean, you roll and move, and then what's your decision? Your decision is buy this or don't buy this, and then mortgage this or don't mortgage this.
Right.
Those are basically your only decisions.
It's interesting when you explain it in that fashion. It occurs to me that Machikoro, which is a game I'm kind of fond of and my children like, but my wife hates, is basically Monopoly. You roll to determine which properties pay off, and then you have money, and you either buy something or you don't. And like Monopoly, if you can buy something, you probably should.
When was the last time you played Catan?
It's been a while.
If the dice only roll ones, then all you're getting is whatever's on the ones.
Right, that's true.
I mean, you can make decisions to sort of try and diversify.
Right, and then to trade your sheep for wood.
But yeah, anyway, that's I think probably enough about Monopoly.
We've let it monopolize our conversation long enough. Welcome to the Puncast.
I guess having spoken about Monopoly and having mentioned Risk, do we talk about Risk?
Sure.
It's another one of those. So Risk is newer. Risk is a French game. Which
that explains Napoleon on the box.
Yeah, it does.
The copy I had Napoleon on it.
It was actually created by a French film director in 1957.
Huh.
Go figure. Here's something about Risk. The game's length is listed as between 1 and 8 hours.
8 hours?
Twilight Imperium-esque.
That's right. For sure. So Risk is one of those games that I have an immense personal history playing. I played it a fair amount in high school and middle school, but there was a long period in college where my roommates and we just had a couple sets of Risk around, and there was always a game going. And usually we played really fast. Like, it was rare that a game took more than an hour.
That's crazy. I can't even conceive of that.
We all knew how to play, and we played really fast. You were rolling the dice the instant it was a chance to be rolling the dice.
Okay. Well, that'd be interesting to see, a speed Risk.
It made the game more interesting because you actually could finish it in a reasonable amount of time.
So this is another game where I guess the question is, like, if we pick it apart by the mechanics, it's area control, it's dice rolling, and is it like hand building?
Yeah, there's hand building, and I think there's also some player versus player things. If you're playing a game with a full suite of players, there's some negotiation about who's going to attack whom, and right, because the way you build your hand is to hold a continent, and not everybody can hold a continent if you're playing, and so being able to do that and or like trading one thing with somebody else so that you can both hold continents, that sort of thing, détente becomes a big part of playing the game well. Also, in my experience, there's a meta game when you're playing a game a whole bunch of times with other people. I was known pretty well for, if you tried to take away my continent, I would destroy my own army, destroying yours. So I wouldn't win the game, but neither would you.
Yeah.
And
Kingmaker aspect.
A little bit, but I didn't particularly care what the other players were doing. You know, in a 5-player game, I'd be the first one out and you'd be the second. And, you know, it wasn't super fun during that game, but people started leaving me alone, and it helped me in the longer strategy of, dozens of games of Risk.
It sounds like it would extend the length of a game of Risk, though. Also,
Yeah, but like I said, we were playing quickly.
If you were to rate Risk,
obviously we're rating it against the games that are available now, and there's just like the level of decision is so meager that even with the strategies I've outlined, there's still not much to think about.
Yeah.
And so 6, I think 6 was fine. 5.
Because of the length, I might drop it down to a 5.
Sure.
But yeah, Parker Brothers game.
And it would probably only gets that high because of the nostalgia I have for it. I think if someone else made a game that was mechanically identical and released it today, I wouldn't have any interest in playing it at all.
Interesting thing about Risk is, God knows there's enough versions of Monopoly out there to choke a horse. But Risk has evolved, where Monopoly, you could debate the extent to which it's evolved over time. Risk, they sort of got in on, I think you could argue, some of their games approach being, hobby games. Sure. What is it? Risk 2210, which was one of the early real tweaks to the game. That sort of brings it into a whole different space. And then Risk was one of the early legacy games.
Right. Might be the first.
It's the first that I really think of in that space.
Mm-hmm. And it's the one that when people would then try to describe what Pandemic Legacy was, they'd say, Rob Davio, creator of Risk Legacy. So, yeah. I think also the Risk name was applied to the recent reprint of the Avalon Hill game Star Wars Queen's Gambit, which they retweaked and then released as Star Wars Risk.
Yeah, which our friend Scott Bogan over at My Board Game Show, go check him out. It's The Board Game Show?
I think it's The Board Game Show, but the website is My Board Game Show.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Scott. If you search Scott Bogan, spelled the way you think it is, and Board Game Show, you'll find him. He really likes that Star Wars Risk. I have played it.
Yeah.
And because I won, it's pretty good. It's certainly no 8-hour game either.
Right.
So it's not a bad one.
I will say most Monopolies that I've encountered that are themed are still just Monopoly. And of course, because it's as old as it is, there are countless Opoly games that are direct mechanical ripoffs of Monopoly, but have some other theme applied.
Yeah, although that, of course, as we all know, since we're serious gamers, you can't copyright a mechanic. So all you have to do is rewrite the rule book and put the word Opoly at the end.
Right.
And day 2, the Monopoly comes out day 1.
Right.
Day 2, you could have New York Opoly.
Of course, the real reason most people don't do that is that games are incredibly terrible ways to make money. And so you really only want to do that once you know a game is certainly going to make money, and it takes time to do that.
Yeah. By the way, to jump back in time, Board Game Geek, Monopoly has a 4.8.
Ooh.
And so does Risk.
Interesting.
By the way, Risk is not afraid of doing a retheme by any stretch of the imagination. Mm-hmm. And one of the worst games I've ever played was a copy of Lord of the Rings Risk.
Okay.
I don't know. This is maybe 6 or 8 years ago. The board itself was so illegible, so unusable that it made playing on it. I don't think we even finished the game. And I can stay up late. I'll finish any game, but it was a grind.
You couldn't read Kamchatka?
Well, no, there wasn't. It was set on this, just one landmass, and they were like, "Oh, well, you should have used the tunnels under the mountains." Well, if I could have told in any way that there was a tunnel under the mountain, perhaps I would have. But since it's
those dwarves dug too deep,
was
there a Balrog?
I don't know. If there was, I would give it to him and walk away. Here, have it, Balrog. It would probably kill him. Anyway, Scrabble, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting game because it isn't what it looks like. So Scrabble was released, in 1938, which is almost 80 years ago. For those of you who didn't want to do the math yourself. Right. I'm sorry, guys. I know you can do that math. It is sold in 121 countries, apparently, and 29 languages. They say it takes about 50 minutes to play, which is a good length for that game. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts about Scrabble? I have a few, but do you want to go first? Or?
Scrabble is a game that I enjoy when I play, and feel like I would be better at it if I played it a lot more.
Okay.
But I don't like it enough to get it out regularly.
Sure. The thing about Scrabble is it's a math game that looks like a word game.
Okay.
Because it's all about knowing those 2-letter words and just like doing the math, knowing the word list. Like, there's Scrabble tournaments are, of course, huge. This is no news. This is,
Well, I mean, that's true for the super competitive players, but I mean, most casual players haven't memorized lists like that and don't think of the game as being a game where you have to memorize a list of words to be able to play it.
So you could argue, perhaps, that Scrabble is one of the first games that, it's certainly the first game we've talked about where it's sort of released almost broken.
Okay.
Here's Scrabble. You can't really play it because you need a Scrabble dictionary.
I guess.
I mean, that's the arbiter.
Right, but in the rule book it says, or any dictionary agreed on by the group.
So here's the thing. So once you do that, right, so we've got a list of rules about what these letters are worth.
Right.
And we've got a word list, whether it's the American Heritage Dictionary or the Scrabble Dictionary.
Yeah.
At that point, if you know those words, especially those 2-letter words and those 3-letter words, you're going to crush.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that is one of the places where Scrabble is different than the other games we've been talking about in that player skill depends heavily on, or somebody winning depends heavily on bringing a skill set to the game that is not in the game.
Yeah.
So whether it's you've spent time memorizing 2-letter words or you have wasted a huge section of your life learning an arcane set of language that then happens to help you in this process.
The other thing is, there was a time where I used a lot of medical dictionaries when I was working in a hospital.
Uh-huh.
Like, dictionaries have personality. And, I knew that one of these dictionaries, there are 2 main ones that I'd use, one of them had the word cootie in it, and the other didn't.
Oh, interesting.
So, at that point, I'm sure that the same is true of Webster's and American Heritage. They're going to have these profanities.
Right.
They're probably not, whatever. More slang, less slang.
As an aside, if I ever get to the position where I can publish a dictionary, I'm going to publish a dictionary without the word gullible in it because it makes for a great prank where you tell someone, hey, this dictionary doesn't have gullible in it, and they refuse to look it up because they don't want to be caught looking up gullible. But in fact, the dictionary doesn't have gullible.
I think you should make that your life's work. Before we put that one to bed.
Okay.
And by put it to bed, I mean rate it.
Rate it.
It has only had, in those 80 years, 4 rule edits.
Whoa.
They've gone through the rules and changed them 4 times in 80 years.
I'm wondering if I can... I'm sure I can't guess because I don't know what the original rules were.
And I don't have it written down in my notes.
Huh.
So you can totally guess, and I won't be able to gainsay you.
Here's a chance for the listeners to participate in the conversation. Tweet us or post a message on Facebook or Instagram with what you think the rule changes are and what's the next rule change that the Scrabble World Council should make.
But Scrabble, Board Game Geek, gives it a 6.3.
Mm-hmm.
And I give it's probably a 12. I can't spell terribly well, but I don't mind losing a game of Scrabble to someone.
I'm going to do 13, I think.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe you're a better speller than I am.
Well, I am an English professor.
No, you're an American professor. You're American.
Fair enough.
I feel like, do we talk about Uno?
I think we should.
Okay. Uno, 1971. So that puts it sort of in, the time frame that we're talking about.
It's still a classic?
Oh, yeah, totally. It sort of falls into this group of games for me where it's sort of, yes, this is probably enough more convenient than just doing this with a deck of playing cards or 2 decks of playing cards. But clearly, this could be done with 2 decks of playing cards.
Sure, yeah, you just have the face cards be the weird, the extra cards. It's one of those games that's ubiquitous, so everybody knows it. Everybody knows how to play. It's not that hard to explain.
Yeah.
There are some interesting decisions to make, but it feels like the sort of game, at least in the amount that I've played it, that you get to a point where there aren't big decisions to make. Like there are kind of optimal strategies to aim for, and so on any given turn, it's pretty clear what card you should play.
On the plus side, it only takes about a half an hour to play.
If that.
Yeah. But
I mean, if you're playing for points, yeah.
You have to play for points, according to the rules.
Okay.
I guess you could play just, one hand, as it were. But I think the rules have you trying to achieve a score total.
Right.
This is one I played as a kid a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It has a 5.3 on Board Game Geek. This is another one where house rules coming out the, out of the woodwork.
Well, we talked on the podcast previously about your family's house rule that sounds way better.
Oh, yeah, the crazy, where you can just, if you have a match, throw it down.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
It certainly gets things moving.
Next time I play, I'm going to play it that way.
Nice. Yeah, I'll probably, I might come in with a 12 here. Once again, you